I'm going to say something that might piss you off. Most of your emotional suffering is self-inflicted. Not because you're weak or stupid, but because you've been taught to think in ways that guarantee misery. Your parents did it. Your teachers did it. Society did it. And now you're doing it to yourself on autopilot. But here's the thing. Once you see how this mental trap works, you can never unsee it. And that's when everything changes. I'm Albert Ellis, and I've helped hundreds of thousands of people escape this trap. Today, you're next. Let's do this. Look, I know you've probably tried everything. Positive thinking, gratitude journals, meditation apps, maybe even therapy. And some of it helped a little, but you're still struggling with the same patterns. You still beat yourself up. You still feel anxious about things you can't control. You still get angry when life doesn't go your way. And you probably started to believe that's just who you are. But here's what nobody's told you. The problem isn't your personality. It's not your childhood. It's not even your circumstances. The problem is that you've learned to think in irrational ways. And those irrational thoughts create irrational emotions, which lead to self-defeating behaviors. It's a system. And once you understand the system, you can change it. I'm not going to give you fluffy affirmations or tell you to just be positive. That's garbage. What I'm going to do is show you the specific thinking errors you're making every single day, the ones that are creating most of your emotional pain. And then I'm going to give you a practical method to dispute these thoughts and replace them with rational ones. Not positive ones, rational ones. There's a big difference. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why you feel the way you feel. And more importantly, you're going to know how to feel different, not by changing your life circumstances, but by changing how you think about them. This is rational emotive behavior therapy, and it works. Let's get started. So let me tell you something most people get completely wrong. They think their emotions come directly from events. Someone cuts them off in traffic. They get angry. They get rejected. They feel worthless. Seems obvious, right? But that's not how it actually works. There's a missing piece in the middle that you're completely unaware of, and that piece is your belief about the event. Let me break this down with what I call the ABC framework. A is the activating event. Something happens in the real world. C is the consequence, the emotion you feel. Most people think a cause is C. Event causes emotion. But that's wrong. Between A and C is B, your belief about the event. And B is what actually causes C. Let me give you an example. Two people get rejected from a job. Same event. One person feels mildly disappointed and moves on. The other spirals into depression and thinks they're a failure. Same A, different C. Why? Because they have different BS, different beliefs about what the rejection means. Person one thinks, well, that's unfortunate. I didn't get that particular job. I'll keep looking. Person two thinks, this proves I'm incompetent. I'll never succeed. I'm worthless. See the difference? Here's why this matters. And I mean really matters. If a cause is C, you're screwed. Because you can't control what happens to you. Life is going to throw curveballs. People will reject you. Things will go wrong. Plans will fall apart. You have zero control over most of that. But if B causes C, if your beliefs create your emotions, then you have power. Because you can change your beliefs. You can't always change events, but you can always change how you think about them. Now, some of you are thinking, but Albert, the rejection does hurt. It's not just my thoughts. And you're right, certain events are genuinely negative. Losing someone you love, getting sick, facing injustice, these things suck. I'm not saying they don't, but there's a huge difference between healthy negative emotions and unhealthy ones. Sadness is healthy. Depression is not. Concern is healthy. Anxiety is not. Annoyance is healthy. Rage is not. The difference? Your beliefs. So what are these beliefs? We'll get specific in a minute, but here's the general pattern. Unhealthy emotions come from irrational beliefs. Beliefs that are rigid, absolute, and unrealistic. I must succeed. People should treat me fairly. I can't stand this discomfort. These demands on reality, these musts and shoulds, are what create most of your suffering. Think about it. When you say, I must succeed, and then you don't, what happens? You don't just feel disappointed. You feel devastated, worthless, like a failure, because you've turned a preference into an absolute demand. And when reality doesn't meet your demand, you fall apart. But if you think I'd really prefer to succeed, but if I don't, I'm still okay and I can try again, then failure becomes feedback, not catastrophe. You feel disappointed, sure, but you don't spiral into depression. That's the system. Events happen. You have beliefs about those events, and those beliefs create your emotional consequences. And right now, most of your beliefs are probably irrational. Don't feel bad about that. Nobody taught you any better. But now you're going to learn. Okay, so now you know the system. Events don't create emotions, your beliefs do. But what exactly are these irrational beliefs? What do they sound like in your head? That's what we're covering next. And trust me, you're going to recognize yourself in every single one of these. After working with thousands of people over 50 years, I found that almost all irrational thinking boils down to three core beliefs. I call them the masturbatory beliefs because they're demands you're making on yourself, other people, and the world. And these demands are making you miserable. The first must is this: I must perform well and win approval. This is the belief that you must succeed, you must be competent, you must be loved and approved of by everyone important. Notice the demand. Now I'd like to succeed, or I prefer approval. Must. And what happens when you don't meet this demand? You don't just feel disappointed, you feel worthless. You don't just think that didn't work out, you think I'm a failure as a person. See the problem? You're taking a specific event and globalizing it into your entire identity. You didn't get the job, therefore you're unemployable. You got rejected by one person, therefore you're unlovable. You made a mistake, therefore you're incompetent. One rejection doesn't make you unlovable. One mistake doesn't make you incompetent. But your must makes you believe it does. I had a client once, a woman in her 30s, who came to me convinced she was a complete failure. Why? Because she got turned down for a promotion. One promotion. And in her mind, that meant she was incompetent, that she'd never advance in her career, that she was worthless compared to her peers. I looked at her and said, "That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard." She was shocked. But then I asked her, "Where's the evidence? You've been promoted before. You've succeeded at dozens of projects. You have skills and experience. One person decided not to give you one specific role, and you're turning that into a global judgment about your worth? That's not rational." And here's the kicker. Her belief that she must get the promotion is what created her depression, not the actual event of not getting it. If she believed I really wanted that promotion, but if I don't get it, I'm still a capable person and there will be other opportunities, she would have felt disappointed, maybe frustrated, but not depressed. The must is what crushed her. The second must is this: other people must treat me fairly and kindly. This is the belief that people should be fair, should be considerate, should appreciate you. And when they're not, you get angry, furious, sometimes rageful, because they violated your rule. But here's the reality check. Other people don't have to follow your rules. They have their own beliefs, their own issues, their own limitations. Are you going to spend your whole life pissed off because people aren't acting how you demand they should? That's exhausting, and it doesn't change them. It just makes you miserable. I see this all the time. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you're furious for the next hour. Why? Because you believe people should drive courteously. Okay, sure, that would be nice. But they don't have to. And getting angry about it doesn't make them better drivers. It just ruins your mood and raises your blood pressure. You're punishing yourself for someone else's behavior. Or how about this? Someone criticizes you and you get enraged. Why? Because you believe people should recognize your efforts and be grateful. But what if they don't? What if they're having a bad day, or they're just a critical person, or they genuinely disagree with what you did? Your demand that they must appreciate you is what's creating your anger, not their actual behavior. Here's what's rational instead. I prefer people treat me fairly and kindly, but there's no universal law that says they have to. Some will, some won't. And when they don't, I can deal with it without falling apart or flying into a rage. See the difference? One is a demand that sets you up for constant anger. The other is a preference that lets you navigate reality without losing your mind. The third must is this: life must be easy and go my way. This is the belief that life must be comfortable, must be fair, must not be too difficult. And when it's not, you can't stand it. You catastrophize. You think this is unbearable, or I can't handle this. But you are handling it. Right now, The fact that you're alive and functioning means you're standing it. It might suck. It might be really hard. But I don't like this is very different from I can't stand this. One is realistic. The other is a lie that creates anxiety and depression. I worked with a guy who was convinced he couldn't stand his job. It was boring, his boss was difficult, the commute was long. And every day he'd come home and tell himself, I can't stand this. This is unbearable. I have to get out of here. And he'd feel anxious and depressed. But here's the thing. He was standing it. He'd been doing it for 3 years. So clearly, he could stand it. It wasn't fun, but it wasn't unbearable. When we worked on changing that belief to I really don't like this job, and I'm actively looking for something better, but in the meantime, I can tolerate it, his anxiety dropped. Not because the job changed. It was still boring. But his belief changed from I can't stand this to I don't like this, but I can handle it. And that made all the difference. Now, I know what you're thinking. But Albert, shouldn't people be kind? Shouldn't I try to succeed? And yes, as preferences, absolutely. I prefer kindness. I prefer success. I prefer an easy life. But the moment I turn that preference into a demand, the moment I say it must happen, I set myself up for emotional disturbance. Because reality doesn't care about my demands. Reality just is. And I can either accept that and work with it, or I can rage against it and suffer. So these are the 3 musts. I must perform well and win approval. Others must treat me fairly and kindly. Life must be easy and go my way. And every time you find yourself upset, angry, anxious, or depressed, I guarantee one of these musts is lurking in your thinking. Your job is to find it. All right, so now you're probably seeing these musts in your own thinking. Good. That's awareness, and awareness is the first step. But awareness alone doesn't change anything. You need to actively dispute these irrational beliefs. And that's exactly what we're doing next. I'm going to teach you the method I've used for 50 years to help people think rationally. Here's where the rubber meets the road. You can't just tell yourself, don't think that way. Your brain won't listen. You have to actively dispute your irrational beliefs with the same force you use to create them. This is D in the ABC model, disputation. And it works. Disputation isn't positive thinking. I'm not asking you to tell yourself, I'm amazing when you feel like garbage. That's fake, and your brain won't buy it. Instead, disputation is asking yourself tough questions to examine whether your belief is actually true. Here are the big 3 questions. 1. Where's the evidence? 2. Is this logical? 3. Is this helping me? Let's break each one down. When you think I'm a failure, ask yourself, what's the actual evidence? Did you fail at one thing? Okay. Does failing at one thing mean you're a failure at everything forever? No. That's overgeneralization. You're taking one data point and making it your entire identity. A failure is someone who fails at everything, always. Is that you? Of course not. You've succeeded at plenty of things. You learned to walk, to read, to talk. You've had friendships, jobs, accomplishments. You're succeeding right now by watching this and trying to improve. So the belief I'm a failure is factually wrong. It doesn't match reality. Or let's say you think nobody likes me. Where's the evidence? Has literally every person you've ever met rejected you? No. You have friends, family members, coworkers who tolerate you at minimum, probably like you. So the belief nobody likes me is demonstrably false. Maybe some people don't like you. So what? That's not the same as nobody. Your brain is exaggerating, globalizing, turning a partial truth into an absolute lie. Now let's talk about logic. Let's say you believe people must like me. Okay, why must they? Where's the universal law that says everyone has to approve of you? It doesn't exist. You're making up a rule and then getting upset when reality doesn't follow your made-up rule. That's not logical. A more logical belief would be I prefer people like me, but there's no reason they have to. Some will, some won't, and I can handle both outcomes. See the difference? One is a demand. The other is a preference. One creates anxiety. The other creates resilience. Or how about this one? I must never make mistakes. Why? Where's the law that says humans must be perfect? Last time I checked, every human being in history has made mistakes. So if you demand perfection from yourself, you're demanding something that's literally impossible. That's the logical. A rational belief would be I prefer to do well, but I'm human and I'll make mistakes sometimes. That's normal and okay. Now let's talk about usefulness. Even if your belief were partially true, let's say you really did screw something up badly. Is beating yourself up helping you fix it? Is calling yourself worthless motivating you to do better? Or is it just making you feel like shit and paralyzing you? Because in my experience, people don't perform better when they hate themselves. They perform better when they accept mistakes, learn from them, and move forward. So ask yourself, is this thought helping me achieve my goals, or is it just making me suffer for no good reason? I had a client who failed an important exam, and his immediate thought was, I'm stupid. I'll never pass. I should just give up. I asked him, is that helping you? Is calling yourself stupid going to make you study better? No, it's going to make you depressed and avoidant. So let's try a different belief. You didn't pass this time. That sucks. But you can study differently, get help, and try again. Which belief is more useful? The one that paralyzes you or the one that motivates you? After you dispute the irrational belief, you arrive at E, a new effective belief. This isn't a positive affirmation. It's a rational, realistic, flexible statement. Instead of I must succeed, it's I strongly prefer to succeed. But if I don't, I'm still a worthwhile person who can learn and try again. Instead of I can't stand this, it's I don't like this, but I can stand it, and I've stood worse before. These effective beliefs won't make you feel ecstatic. They'll make you feel appropriately concerned or disappointed, which is healthy. And from that healthy emotional state, you can actually solve problems instead of wallowing in misery. Let me give you a personal example. Early in my career, I had massive social anxiety, especially around women. I was terrified of rejection. My belief was I must not be rejected, because rejection proves I'm unlovable. Classic irrational must. So you know what I did? I went to the Bronx Botanical Garden, and I approached 100 women in 1 month. I just walked up and started conversations. And guess what? A lot of them rejected me. Some were rude. Some just walked away. And I stood there and disputed my belief. I asked myself, where's the evidence that rejection means I'm unlovable? There isn't any. Is it logical to think that one person's preference defines my worth? No. Is this belief helping me? Hell no. It's keeping me isolated and lonely. So I developed a new, effective belief. I prefer not to be rejected, but if I am, it's just one person's opinion and it doesn't define me. And after enough repetitions, the anxiety faded. Not because rejection stopped happening, but because I stopped believing it meant something catastrophic about me. That's disputation in action. You find the irrational belief. You challenge it with evidence, logic, and usefulness. You replace it with a rational belief. And you practice this over and over until it becomes automatic. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, Albert, this makes sense in theory, but what about the really hard stuff? What about when life actually is terrible? Good question. That's what we're tackling next. How to apply this when things genuinely suck. One of the most damaging things people do is rate their entire worth as a human being based on their performance, other people's approval, or their circumstances. This is insane, and I'm going to explain why. Human beings love to rate things. Rate movies, rate restaurants, rate experiences. Fine, but then we turn that rating system on ourselves. I'm a 7 out of 10. I'm better than him, but worse than her. I'm a failure. I'm successful. And this is a fundamental error in thinking. You can't rate a human being. You can rate behaviors, sure. You can say that was a good decision or that was a mistake. But you can't rate the totality of a person because we're too complex. You're not your job. You're not your relationship status. You're not your bank account. You're not even your worst moment or your best moment. You're an ongoing, ever-changing process. Think about it. You've done thousands of things in your life. Some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. So what's your overall rating? It's impossible to calculate. And more importantly, it's useless. Because even if you could calculate it, so what? Does that number define your worth? Of course not. So here's what I teach instead. Unconditional self-acceptance. USA. Not self-esteem, which goes up and down based on performance. Not self-confidence, which depends on circumstances. But self-acceptance. The decision to accept yourself as a fallible, imperfect human being who will sometimes succeed and sometimes fail, who will sometimes be liked and sometimes rejected, who will sometimes feel good and sometimes feel bad. And all that is okay. You're not good because you succeed. You're not bad because you fail. You just are. And from that place of acceptance, you can actually improve, not because you need to prove your worth, but because you want to grow. Let's say you get fired. Unconditional self-acceptance says, I lost my job. That sucks. Maybe I made mistakes. Maybe it was circumstances beyond my control. Either way, I'm still a worthwhile person. This doesn't define me. Now, what's my next step? Compare that to I got fired. Therefore, I'm a loser who will never succeed. One of those beliefs lets you move forward. The other paralyzes you in shame. Which would you rather carry? I worked with a guy who built a business for 10 years, and then it went bankrupt. He was devastated. His whole identity was wrapped up in being a successful entrepreneur. And when the business failed, he thought he failed. He became suicidal. He couldn't see any reason to keep living. We worked on unconditional self-acceptance. I said to him, you're not your business. The business failed. That's a fact. But you didn't fail as a human being. You took a risk, you worked hard, and it didn't work out this time. That doesn't make you worthless. You still have value, skills, relationships, the ability to try again. And slowly, painfully, he started to separate his worth from his business outcomes. 6 months later, he started a new venture. And this time, he approached it differently. Not to prove his worth, but because he enjoyed the work. And guess what? It succeeded. But more importantly, he told me, even if this one fails too, I'll be okay. Because I know now that my worth isn't tied to my results. That's unconditional self-acceptance. When you stop rating yourself, you stop being so damn fragile. Criticism doesn't destroy you. It's just information. Failure doesn't devastate you. It's just a data point. Rejection doesn't crush you. It's just someone's preference. You become anti-fragile. And ironically, when you stop needing to prove your worth, you actually perform better. Because you're not operating from fear anymore. You're operating from genuine interest and growth. Think about it like this. Would you rate a river? Would you say that's a good river or that's a bad river? No. A river just flows. Sometimes it's calm. Sometimes it's turbulent. Sometimes it nourishes the land. Sometimes it floods. But you don't judge the river. It just is. Same with you. You're a process, not a product. You're constantly changing, learning, experiencing. And you can't sum that up with a rating. So stop trying. Accept yourself unconditionally. Not because you're perfect, but because you're human. And that's enough. All right, we've covered the beliefs, the disputation process, and self-acceptance. But there's one more massive trap people fall into, and it might be the sneakiest one of all. It's called low frustration tolerance, and it's probably running half your life decisions. Let's get into it. Most people are running their lives to avoid discomfort, and in doing so, they create way more suffering than the discomfort they're avoiding. This is low frustration tolerance, and it's keeping you stuck. Low frustration tolerance is the belief that you can't handle discomfort, that if something is difficult, unpleasant, or painful, it's unbearable and you must avoid it or escape it immediately. This shows up everywhere. You don't have a difficult conversation because it'll be uncomfortable. You don't start the business because rejection might hurt. You don't go to the gym because the effort feels hard. You stay in a bad relationship because being alone feels scary. You procrastinate on important work because it's mentally taxing. You're optimizing for short-term comfort, and it's destroying your long-term happiness. When something uncomfortable happens, your brain says, I can't stand this. But that's a lie. You're standing it. Right now, every difficult thing you've ever been through, you've stood. Maybe it wasn't fun. Maybe it was genuinely hard. But you didn't die. You didn't disintegrate. You made it through. So the accurate statement isn't I can't stand this. It's I don't like this, but I can stand it, and I have evidence for my entire life that I can tolerate discomfort. That reframe changes everything. Here's the trade-off nobody explains to you. You can have short-term discomfort or long-term suffering. Pick one, because avoiding the discomfort of a difficult conversation leads to years of resentment. Avoiding the discomfort of job searching leads to years of hating your work. Avoiding the discomfort of exercise leads to years of health problems. Avoiding the discomfort of being alone leads to years in a toxic relationship. The discomfort is temporary. The suffering from avoidance lasts. So which do you actually prefer? 5 minutes of awkwardness or 5 years of regret? I had a client who avoided confrontation her entire life. She let people walk all over her, take advantage of her, disrespect her, and she'd just smile and take it. Why? Because confrontation felt unbearable. She couldn't stand the thought of someone being angry at her or thinking she was difficult. So I asked her, what's the cost? What are you paying for this avoidance? And she broke down. She'd been in a miserable marriage for 15 years because she couldn't have the hard conversation about her needs. She'd been passed over for promotions because she couldn't advocate for herself. She had fake friendships with people who used her. The cost was enormous. And I said to her, you think you can't stand 5 minutes of discomfort in a difficult conversation, but you're standing 15 years of misery, which is actually harder. And something clicked. She realized she'd been choosing long-term suffering to avoid short-term discomfort. And that's insane. So she started practicing. She had a conversation with her husband. It was uncomfortable. He got defensive, but they worked through it and their relationship improved. She asked for a raise at work. Her boss said no at first, but she persisted and eventually got it. She set boundaries with her friends. Some of them didn't like it and drifted away, but the real friends stayed and the relationships got deeper. And you know what she told me? The discomfort wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. And even when it was hard, it was still better than the suffering I'd been living with. That's high frustration tolerance. The way you build high frustration tolerance is the same way you build any muscle. You use it. You deliberately do uncomfortable things. You have a hard conversation. You start the project even though it's scary. You sit with anxiety instead of immediately distracting yourself. You go to the gym even though you don't feel like it. And each time you do, you prove to yourself, I can handle this. I can tolerate discomfort in service of my values. And the next time it's a little easier. Not because the situation changed, but because your belief about your ability changed. You become someone who could do hard things. And that's freedom. Think about it like lifting weights. Nobody says I can't stand lifting this weight and expects the weight to disappear. You either lift it or you don't. You build the muscle or you don't. Same with emotional discomfort. You either tolerate it and grow, or you avoid it and stay stuck. So next time you're about to avoid something because it feels uncomfortable, pause. Ask yourself, is this discomfort actually unbearable, or is it just unpleasant? And is avoiding it creating more long-term suffering than facing it would? If the answer is yes, then do the uncomfortable thing. Build the muscle. Prove to yourself that you can stand it. Because you can. You absolutely can. Okay, we've covered a lot. You now understand how your beliefs create your emotions, what the irrational beliefs are, how to dispute them, how to accept yourself, and how to tolerate discomfort. But here's the thing. Knowing this intellectually doesn't change anything. You have to practice it. And I'm going to leave you with the exact practice framework before we wrap up. Everything I've taught you today is useless if you don't actually apply it. And applying it requires deliberate, repeated practice. Here's how to make this a habit that actually changes your life. Every single day, I want you to do this. Notice when you're upset, any negative emotion, anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, whatever. That's your cue. Then run through the ABC model. What was the activating event? What am I feeling? The consequence. And most importantly, what am I believing about this event? Write it down. Don't skip this. Writing forces clarity. Your brain can lie to you when you're just thinking, but when you write it down, you have to be specific. So write down the event, the emotion, and the belief. Then dispute the belief. Ask the 3 questions. Where's the evidence? Is this logical? Is this helping me? Write down your answers. Challenge yourself. Be your own defense attorney cross-examining a hostile witness. Don't accept lazy thinking. Then write down a more effective, rational belief. Not a positive affirmation, but a realistic, flexible alternative to the irrational belief. Then notice how you feel. You might not feel amazing, but you'll probably feel less disturbed, less anxious, less depressed, less angry. Do this every day for 30 days, and you'll rewire your thinking patterns. I'm not exaggerating. This works, but only if you actually do it. Here's something else I'm famous for: shame-attacking exercises. These are deliberate acts where you do something mildly embarrassing in public to prove to yourself that embarrassment won't kill you. Sing in the subway. Wear mismatched shoes. Ask a stranger a silly question. Walk backwards down the street. Anything that makes you feel self-conscious but isn't harmful or illegal. Why? Because you're proving that other people's judgments don't determine your worth. You're building high frustration tolerance and unconditional self-acceptance at the same time. You're facing the fear that people will think you're weird and then realizing it doesn't actually matter. I used to tell my clients, go do something embarrassing and report back. And they'd come back laughing. They'd say, I thought people would stare and judge me, but most didn't even notice. And the ones who did, so what? I survived. I'm still okay. And that realization is powerful. So pick something mildly embarrassing and do it this week. Test your beliefs about social judgment. You'll be surprised how little it matters. Here's another practice. Start paying attention to your language. How often do you say should, must, have to, need to? Every time you catch one, pause. Ask yourself, is this really a must or is it a preference? Because I must get this promotion creates anxiety. I prefer to get this promotion, but I'll be okay either way creates motivation without anxiety. Language shapes thought. Change your language. Change your beliefs. And here's the last piece. Get support. This work is hard. You're fighting decades of conditioning. So get support. Find a therapist trained in REBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. Join a group. Talk to friends who get it. And be patient with yourself. You're not going to master this overnight. You're going to slip back into irrational thinking. That's normal. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. Every time you catch an irrational belief and dispute it, you're winning. Keep going. Think about learning to walk. You didn't master it in one day. You fell, got up, fell again, kept trying. Same with rational thinking. You'll fall back into old patterns. That's okay. Just notice it, dispute it, and keep going. Progress over perfection. All right, we're coming to the end. Let me tie this all together for you and leave you with one final thought that I hope sticks with you forever. So here's what we've covered today. You learned that events don't create your emotions. Your beliefs about events do. You learned the 3 major irrational beliefs that create most human suffering. Demanding that you must perform perfectly, that others must treat you fairly, and that life must be easy. You learned how to dispute these beliefs by asking, where's the evidence? Is this logical? Is this helping me? You learned about unconditional self-acceptance, that you can't rate yourself as a human being, only your behaviors. You learn about high frustration tolerance, that discomfort won't kill you, and avoiding it creates worse suffering. And you learn the daily practices to actually make this stick. Now here's the thing I want you to remember. You're not broken. You never were. You're a human being who learned some irrational ways of thinking, probably from well-meaning people who didn't know any better. And just like you learned those patterns, you can unlearn them. You can choose different beliefs. You can feel different emotions. You can live a different life. Not by changing your circumstances, but by changing how you think about your circumstances. This isn't easy. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes courage to question beliefs you've held your whole life. But it's worth it, because the alternative is spending the rest of your life being disturbed by things that don't have to disturb you. And you deserve better than that. So start today. Notice your next upset feeling. Run it through the ABC model. Dispute the irrational belief. Build the muscle. And watch what happens. You got this. Now go do the work.